Welcome. It's another Parenting and Mental Health Wednesday, and I wanted to go over something that you've probably dealt with as a parent before, and that is boredom. So let's get started. Let me first share my screen, and then we'll go from there. I guess I could enter a full screen. Oh well. Okay, so let's get going. So, boredom. We've all had kids that have dealt with this, right? We've had kids that say that they're bored, they don't have anything to do. I mean, I could go on and on because I've had to deal with this 100 times. Well, I found this great quote by Tolstoy. Yes, I know, a little deep and existential, but um, Tolstoy said boredom is merely the desire for desires. So when we look at it that way, it's really just kids' sign saying, hey, I want to feel excited about something. So when I was a kid, my mom would always say, only boring people are bored. And that used to drive me crazy because it just felt so, I don't know, it just felt off to me, right? Um, and so let's talk a little bit more about this. First of all, let's start about the truth of boredom. You know, maybe by the second day of winter break or after the holidays are over or the second week into the summer, you hear, I'm bored. Honestly, I heard it from my kid the other day, a couple minutes after we got out of, I think she had a game, and she immediately was telling me she was bored. I thought that was absolutely ridiculous, right? I mean, we had just barely gotten done with her sporting event, and she was already saying she was bored. So when we're dealing with things like that, we want to make sure that we approach it in a way where we're coming at it with some knowledge. You know, the kids today get a lot of things that are handed to them that enable them to be immediately gratified, right? We have social media, we have even TV anymore. You don't wait until Thursday night at 8 o'clock to watch your favorite show. You can watch it anytime you want. So you don't have to make time to watch something. You can record it. You can play any game you want pretty much at any time. You can talk to your friends pretty much at any time because everyone has a smartphone now. So this idea, this constant ability to get a dopamine hit is making kids more prone to boredom than they ever were before. Well, here's the truth about boredom, though. Boredom is the precursor to creativity. And because these kids have access to all these technologies that create these unrealistic expectations of being entertained, they really struggle with wanting to be excited about something. So there are some things that we want to make sure, and we want to, well, sometimes it's easier just to shove a screen in their face or to be directive and give them something to do. Sometimes we want to allow them to be bored because there are benefits to boredom. Boredom builds resilience. Okay. There's a lot of research out there that says tolerating boredom teaches kids to manage frustrations and also regulate emotions. Um, Plus, boredom fosters the ability for kids to learn how to plan and problem solve and often be more creative. Think about a time if you lived near a park or in the woods, or even if you were inside your house and you had nothing else to do. I know I used to go outside and I started creating trails and building forts and things like that outside because there was nothing else to do. Um, when I was inside, when it's colder out or whatever, I would find things to do. I would have self-directed play that I came up with. I didn't have to have someone tell me what to do. So This idea of giving and allowing kids to be bored is great because what it does for us, or what it does for our kids, is it enables kids to build not only resilience and creativity, but also fosters independence. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second because I want to make sure that I'm definitely sharing all the right things here for you and that we have the right screen. So thanks for hanging with me for just a second while I fix this. Okay, I don't know if that's any better. Maybe a little bit better. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the benefits of boredom. Let's move on and talk about some abilities in being proactive and really having a solid way to respond to when kids are bored. So for me, my child hates this, so I'm not sure I recommend this, but it does get them to stop saying it. Immediately when my youngest child says she's bored, I immediately go, awesome, you're going to be creative now. And she rolls her eyes and she gets mad at me and she immediately tells me, ugh, and stomps away. She knows what to expect at least. When kids say they're bored, they might be attention seeking. They might be restless. They might be hungry. You want to tackle all that proactively, right? So you're going to know best if you've been around your child all day, whether or not they have any of these things. So start there. Certainly, this can happen when you're in a car ride, you have a long ride. You can sometimes, if you just ignore the boredom comment for a few minutes, they will find a way to engage. Or if they know, if they tell you they're bored, that they're not going to get anywhere with you, they might quickly find something to do. I know that's happened in my car before with my children. You want to, um, you can help create an activity chart for your kids, or some parents have like a jar, an activity jar where the kid reaches in and that creates a fun, we don't know where we're going to get thing where they reach into the drawer and they have to pull out an activity and then that's the one they have to do for at least 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Or you can build an activity chart with kids where you let them pick all the different things they can do and honestly, without a screen, right? Because we don't want them to get in this habit of just constantly reaffirming this instant gratification with a screen. So we want to find things that they can do independently. So you can sit down and proactively do that with your kids and create an activity chart that you can put up somewhere. Um, and then when boredom strikes, you can tell them to immediately go to their activity chart and look for something. Now, the activity chart obviously is going to have to be refreshed, probably yearly, maybe sooner, um, so that the activities are age appropriate. And they're also things that, now the kid has, that your child has done it so many times, they're like, I don't want to do that anymore, right? So sometimes that can happen. But ultimately, going back to that quote by Tolstoy, we just want to find and help our children find something they can get excited about, right? That desire for something to desire. Um, so you can incorporate some independent projects, right? So that's kind of that encouragement of figure it out on your own, which is good. For younger kids, though, you might have to start a little bit more collaboratively, and you might have to help them get started, especially if it's some sort of craft. For younger kids, remember they might not be able to read, they might not be able to read instructions well or follow them. So a little guided help can be awesome. And then you can also have things that don't require quite as much guided help. Something like magnetiles are great for creativity and guided. Um, Giving kids, kids safe scissors and some paper and some glue and just letting them create things, or showing them how to do the craft and then letting them do it on their own. Okay. So examples of activity chart items. Well, you can create scavenger hunts, nature hunts. You can tell them to go outside and build a fort. You can tell them to go outside and pick flowers or make, leaf prints. You can have a list of all these different things. If, for older kids, for teens, you can have them create a podcast or some sort of TikTok video, or you can have them, honestly, I have a whole chore list that when my kids get bored, I'm like, great, there's a list of chores over there. They're your responsibility. I think that some of those need to get done. Again, that's kind of an encouragement of, hey, if you're bored, then we're going to put you to work. Not a bad lesson to learn because in life, that can happen. So we want to make sure we keep busy and we keep ourselves occupied. So again, you can brainstorm this and you want to make sure it's age appropriate and that you continually, maybe you do check in from time to time. It's good to kind of let them do it and back away. Like, maybe you make some Play-Doh, but then you give it to them and let them play with it. Or maybe you make some homemade slime, but then you let them play with it for a little bit on their own, right? Um, Things like that, or paper airplanes, sun catchers, all these different things you can do, maybe help them get started. If you have a local stream, you can always have them go searching. You can have them search for gold or look for little minnows. Or, there's all sorts of different things you can do. And certainly you can buy craft kits. But again, when you do the craft kit, you're going to have to engage in some sort of helping them at first to get them started, and then go from there. I'm always encouraging when kids feel a little bit bored, helping them find a friend to play with. I think it's really important to have kids engage in collaborative play. I know, at least for my kids, they're much more likely to not be bored when they're with a friend because they come up with ideas together. Now, sometimes they get into it that one kid wants to do things, the other kid doesn't. Okay, you kind of have to work through that. Um, but you can figure that out together. As part of this, not only does boredom, you know, foster creativity, but it also is encouraging independence within your child. We don't want to be parenting, hovering over our kids for the rest of our lives, right? We would like to have our own things to do. And in order to do that, we have to give them something to do and then show that we trust them that they're going to do it. So sometimes that requires, and certainly the younger they are, helping them get set up, setting boundaries, explaining to them what you expect. So if you set up some sort of, sensory play area with, slime and Play-Doh and whatever, you might want to make sure that you set up in an area where you don't mind it getting a little messy, but then also explain that when the timer goes off or when this or when that, that they're going to need to clean up themselves and explain, the rewards and consequences for doing or not doing the action. So setting up some boundaries and some, rules will be helpful for the kids to understand. And then allowing them to have that little bit of independence. Um, in the summertime when it's nice out, I do kick my kids out. I tell them that they need to stay outside for a certain amount of time. Usually they don't have a lot of after school activities. They're outside until the sun goes down. Um, and they know that this is a rule. So then they find things to do. Every once in a while, they'll walk over to a friend's house and see if they want to play, or they'll find their own things to do. But they know the expectation is they're not going to get anything from me. And now these kids are a little bit older. When they're younger, again, you have to kind of help feed them ideas so that they can do it. Praise the great activity, maybe check in on them, but then walk away, right? Don't say, hey, you want to do this next and keep loading them up with things. Allow them to enjoy whatever they are into. And when they're into it, if they want to tell you about it, be open to it, right? Don't check out and just go, oh, yeah, that's great, right? Because that's not really encouraging them to do it again. So remember, if we want to encourage independence, we want to encourage resilience and all of this, we need to reward and praise them, especially when they ask for it. Because part of this is asking for some sort of attention. So part of the creativity thing is open-ended tasks, right? A lot of these craft kits are very specific. You have to get a certain way, and that can feel really frustrating to kids if they don't get it exactly right. Um, Legos have come a long way since I was a kid. The directions weren't nearly as good when I was a kid as they are now. Um, that said, certain crafts I can remember as a kid, if I didn't do it right, I would get really disappointed in myself. So, giving them some things that do have an end goal, but maybe others don't. Like teach them maybe how to make a sun catcher, give them all the stuff, and then let them design their own. You know, um, or when you're baking cookies, if you need to decorate the cookies, don't worry about what they look like. right? Every Christmas time, we always bake a bunch. We always do cookie cutter sugar cookies because my kids love to decorate them. And they've gotten better over the years. We also do gingerbread houses. I'd build one with them. What I don't do is help them build theirs. I mean, I might if they ask for help, but they see what I'm doing and then sometimes they mimic it. Or they ask me how I did that. Or then they say, hey, I'm trying to do this. Or if I see they get frustrated, I'm like, hey, what are you trying to do? And then I can help them figure it out. But I don't direct them. And that's what's part of the important part of of creating open-ended tasks. Another really fun thing to do is to help them brainstorm. Maybe get a bunch of recycled items, toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, uh, twisty ties, and some glue, some paper, some tissue paper, things like that, and then have them give them a question like, "Oh, what animal could you create out of this stuff?" Right? And then have them do it, right? That's an open-ended question that gets them thinking about it and being creative. Failure is inevitable in life, truly, and it's super valuable because when we fail, we learn. That's when we learn the most. So, what we want to do is not, you know, uh, criticize failure or, really tell them how sad we feel for them and just throw everything away and dump it out. We want to just emphasize that, or realize that, failure builds perseverance and grit. And so you want to encourage them to reflect on what they did, especially for older kids. They're better at this, right? So if they try to be creative with something, maybe they skateboard and they were trying a new trick, or maybe they were trying to do some sort of move, or maybe they were trying to create a video and it didn't go so well. And you can kind of ask them questions like, okay, well, what were you trying to do? And, what is it that you felt like you didn't do well? And then you could kind of help them brainstorm through it. In some cases, especially like technology stuff, building videos and things like that, maybe they didn't have the proper software. Or maybe you could show them a trick with technology that you're like, hey, in order to do this, like to zoom in or to do this or to clip out sections, you can use this. Um, you can also, my kids have gotten into like that uh, was it the time stop uh, video where a lot of Lego movies use it. And so they just take little clips of Legos in different positions and they put all the clips together and it creates a movie. Um, that took a little bit of learning how to do it. They had fun with it. Whenever they did it, I watched the whole thing. I got excited about it. I thought that was cool. I would ask them a question about it that was usually open-ended. It wasn't yes or no, and like not did you have fun? It was more of like, oh, cool. Like, what other ideas do you have for this type of thing? Um, you really want to encourage so they try again, right? Realistic expectations for boredom. When kids are younger, they are probably only going to be able to do maybe, if you're very lucky, 15 minutes of independent play without some sort of guidance, or they certainly can maybe watch a screen for longer. But, if they're doing something, so you will have to check in with them a little bit more frequently and maybe give them something new to do, or they might really get into it if you're doing it with them. And remember, for little kids, they just love to run around and bounce. And so anything you have where they can just run around and bounce or smash things, they are going to jump from activity to activity, which can feel chaotic for you, but just have a bunch of things ready. For older kids, they have more ability to stay focused on a task for longer, but it's still maybe an hour, right? So when you know that, maybe have a snack ready for them after the hour, or maybe actually set a timer for them and say, hey, I want you to be creative and try and stay in this space until this timer goes off. When this timer goes off, I'll let you watch something on the screen, or we will do something together, right? And then that kind of sets the structure of like, okay, well, even if they just lay on the ground and stare up at the clouds or stare at the wall for 15 minutes, you're forcing them to understand how to be comfortable in their own skin and just sit and have nothing to do, which is going to help again with that resilience and perseverance and even the creativity. So, sometimes you have to balance the structured and unstructured time. This is modeled really well in school where they'll have, uh, like silent sustained reading, right? Or they'll have unstructured time, which is generally recess, right? Where kids can go out and do whatever they want. But they have other structured time where they're engaged. So, kind of a mini model of this at home can be really helpful where, maybe On the weekend, there's a time on Saturdays or Sundays where you just say, yep, we got to get outside. We're going to take you to the park. We're not going to give you something to do. You've just got to do it on your own. And then when you get back from the park, maybe you do a structured activity with them, right? So helping find that balance, and you'll know what's best for you and your children. Just realize that boredom really is a growth opportunity. And like I said, there are different things that you can learn to say, like, awesome, now you're going to be creative, or wonderful, I can't see what you come up with that you're excited about, right? Whether you're really sincere about that or not, over time, your kids will get that being bored doesn't mean mommy or daddy or grandma or grandpa or whomever is just going to give me something to do. And that's what you want to get away from, because then that you are going to be a sole resource every single time. And they also don't want to learn that every time they say they're bored that they get their tablet or they get to get on a screen. You want to really encourage this ability to allow them to be bored because it will help them to be more creative. It does build resilience. And in the long run, as a parent, it will help you not be constantly tugged on and called for because you are the source of the entertainment. Um, Sometimes when my kids say bored, luckily I live in a neighborhood with some safe roads. I will just say, okay, well, walk up to your friend's house and see if they can play. They will sometimes say, well, can't you text the mom first? I'm like, no, I want you to walk up to the door. And I do this very intentionally because one, it takes time to walk to the other house. They have to be outside. They have to be on their own. Two, it teaches them how to deal with rejection. If the parent says, oh, so and so can't play right now, okay, they learn how to deal with rejection, they learn how to be respectful. If they do get to go, they learn communication skills, they learn how to make sure I now know that they were able to play. Or if I let them go up there, I say, hey, go ask so and so wants to play, I need you back by X time. So all that stuff is helping build independence. And again, you're not going to do this with a 3-year-old, but an older kid you can do that with. And this is something that kind of helps your child get that independence. And with that, you're going to see them be bored a lot less often. Sometimes too much. I've had a couple times where my kids get bored and without talking to me, they just, end up walking over to a friend's house. We've dealt with that. Like I said, there are growing pains in all these things. You just have to find out that great balance. So I hope that was kind of helpful with dealing with boredom. Like I said, boredom is a great thing for kids. It's not a bad thing. And so you can come up with your own saying about boredom that, might get you some eye rolls, but that's okay. And what you want to encourage is your kids' ability to create their own entertainment. I see all too often with some young adults now that they have no desire to do anything and they just don't even know how to create something to do. So, giving your children the gift of learning how to deal with boredom and sit in that quiet space and figure it out on their own is such a great gift. And I hope you were able to remember some of the things that we talked about today, like building that activity chart, brainstorming with your kids ahead of time, having some things ready that that your kids might like to do. When my kids were younger, I always had puzzles and little Lego sets that were ready to go when the kids got bored, or that activity jar. Or I would get the Legos out and say, "Hey, build your favorite animal," and they would just have to figure it out, right? So I would kind of direct initially, but then they would have to do it on their own, right? That's when I stopped directing. Um, Sometimes you can give examples of like, hey, you want to do this, this, or this? But even with adults, when it's someone else's idea, we're less likely to do it. But when it's our own idea, we have buy-in and we want to do it. So with kids, it's no different. Try and help them figure out. So that's why it's important to brainstorm with them the activities that they think would be fun to do when they're bored. Hope this was helpful. Have a great Wednesday, and I'll see you next week.